Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Collective Clicks podcast. This is your host, Brandon Bateman, and today I'm joined by Al Nicoletti. We talk all about probate, how long do probates take, what are some common reasons that deals blow up, and how can you avoid those things? How can you sniff out a good potential probate deal from a bad potential probate deal? Just all these things based on his experience. He's done over 700 probate deals in the state of Florida. So I hope you'll find the episode useful, and I'll see you there. Welcome to the show, Al. Super excited to have you here. How you doing?
Good, Brandon. I'm happy to be on the podcast with you, man.
Yeah, I'm super excited for you to be here too. When I think in my mind of like people that bring energy to real estate investing, like Al is right there at the top of my list. So really, really excited to have you here. Brighten up my day a little bit.
Thanks, man.
For yeah, for
You
people
should
that
see
don't
what
know you,
I'm with, though. Like it's every day is like there's something going on. I mean, my days every day is crazy.
yeah, I fully believe you. Trust me. You don't have to tell me twice. Yeah, and you're kind of in that phase of a business, I think, where everybody feels that way a little bit. So yeah, that's crazy, and there's probably a lot to talk about there. But for people that don't know you, haven't heard of you or seen any of your content or something like that, just if you wouldn't mind, just like a brief summary, like who are you? What's your background? What do you do? Anything.
Yeah. So I'm Al Nicoletti. I'm a probate attorney in Florida. I've been doing this for 7 years now. I've done over 700 probates in Florida, working with a lot of investors, realtors, title companies. And where my specialty is I come in and help solve the problem when you're under contract with a seller or the title company tells you, hey, we got to do probate. And so there's some kind of probate involved. That's where I come in on the legal side to help overcome the issue, figure out and dissect what's going on, and see what the solution is, and then get it to the closing table so that everybody can close. That's where I come in. When I first started doing this, Brandon, it wasn't just probate; it was a lot of the foreclosure world. So I got to see a lot of like what was going on with the foreclosure defense, and then all of a sudden like how probate kind of got dabbled in there because I was with pre-foreclosures you're going to find distressed properties because somebody owned it, they either can't pay, they won't pay, or they're dead. So I found a lot of that. My background really started down in Miami, and found my way to Jacksonville. Really found this niche, wild story that was with probate. And I realized, Brandon, that there were just tons of opportunities out there where there's just lots of properties. A lot of them are titled where there needs to be a probate involved. And when I saw that model, I saw this in right where there can be somebody that can come in and provide a solution to the seller's problem. And ever since then, just blown it up, spoke everywhere, met with a lot of investors, and it's been a great journey. It's crazy. I've had my own law firm for 3+ years now, and we're scaling.
Yeah, very, very cool. Yeah, thanks for sharing all that, Al. I mean, I think like obviously probate, one of the biggest areas that investors love to focus on. One of the places where you'll find the most distress. And I'm super curious just to like, hopefully pull some wisdom out of your mind. I can tell you the number one thing I hear about probate. It happens all the time. Like we're working with a client that get a deal under contract, and they're like, oh, but that's a probate one. And they're like, they don't count it because they're like, oh, it's gonna take forever to get that close. Like, I'm curious from your perspective. I mean, you've done 700 of these. Like, walk me through the process with the probate lead. Like, how long, in your opinion, well, not necessarily in your opinion, but in your experience, does it take to bring something through the whole cycle?
Yeah, so this has definitely been one of the things from the very beginning that I really explained to a lot of investors because for a long time before me, the investors were like, wait a second, this is going to take 6, 9 months, 12 months, a year. And sometimes, Brandon, I'm at presentations and they're like, hey, this is going to take 2 years, or, they think it takes 2, 3 years. And when I started doing this, so get a load of this. When I did my first probate, this was pre-COVID. I wanted to see like what was really the potential here. So when I first filed the probate, I got the case number, I went downtown, judge looked at everything, signed, we were done. Literally, it took 4 days to do a probate. And
Wow.
yeah, and this was pre-COVID. And when I saw what was going on then, I was like, wait a second, is it like this in every county? So, COVID happens, we're all virtual, everybody's submitting things, I'm doing things all over the state. And I'm really learning about what different processes are happening with different counties. The real answer is I would say about 80 to 90% of these probates can be done within a matter of weeks, like 4 to 8 weeks. That's my range that I like because some counties have different rules with checklists, procedures, and different hurdles that we have to overcome, some nuances. Some counties could be a little bit longer because they have different reviews. But the whole thing of 6, 9, 12 months, it doesn't take that long. And I think the procedures can be a lot faster. And to all the investors that are listening, I'd say this to you: whenever you get that lead that comes in, if it's inbound or outbound marketing, don't pass that probate off. I mean, there could be options with that. I'm only in Florida. I know, and I know you know that, Brandon. But a lot of people don't realize that there's options. There's people you can go to. There's experts that you can leverage that can help with that.
Yeah, no, that's helpful to know. So help me understand this. So is it that probate doesn't take 6 or 9 or 12 months, or is it that it could take that long if you do XYZ, but if you do ABC instead, then it can be 4 to 8 weeks?
So the idea of 4 to 8 weeks is everybody's on the same page, everybody's holding hands, signing the contract, agreeing, and moving to closing, right? That's the beautiful part about it, right? That's where I explain that this thing can get done fast. It's where then you start having uncooperative people, or maybe nobody signing documents, and you have to track people down in the process to make them sign things. That's where the process, of course, is going to be longer. But when you have everybody together, which I'd say a high percentage is where everybody is just on the same page, that's when it's going to be done fast. We've had a few cases where when you have a missing heir maybe, or uncooperative people, sure, those are going to take like 3, 4, 5 months, maybe longer. But the way to look at it is, in that deal, is it worth your time to wait that long if there is a solution because there's enough money in the deal to make it happen? That's where I tell a lot of people too, is like, with these probates, the money's got to be there if this thing starts getting more complicated.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Does the legal representation that you have affect pretty strongly how long it takes? Like, could it just be that you work with, because you said like when people work with you, you can get it done pretty fast. Like, is it basically like, obviously if it takes you, if there's 64 heirs and you only have contact with 20 of them and you got to get the rest, like obviously that's going to take a minute, or you just shouldn't do that. But assuming everybody's holding hands and stuff, like does the let's take you out of the equation, for the people that are listening that aren't in Florida. Because if you're in Florida, you just hire Al. Like, it's simple. But let's just say I'm in Utah here. Like what are some things I want to think through in terms of like who I hire, who I work with to make this happen fast?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So sometimes we know people in other states, like lawyers know people in other states. I know a few in other states. I don't know all the states. But one of my best recommendations is, one, get with somebody that is also doing high volume deals in that state. Why high volume? Because the chances of them finding a messy deal are higher than somebody doing just a one-off or one deal a month. The high volume investors are the ones that are really dialed in on making sure that they're having a special attorney for that work, right? Another thing is local RIAs, local meetups. There's always somebody that is having a problem with the deal. And when you go there, maybe they have an open mic night, maybe they have like a Q&A or like a networking event that you can really ask and find out. Also, not every lawyer's the same, right? So what you really want to hone in on for finding that right person if you're getting into a messy deal. That right lawyer is find out like what percentage of their practice really is probate or messy deals, right? Because there's a lot of lawyers that say, I do this, I do this, I do divorce, I do criminal law, I do mergers and acquisitions. It's like, how do you do all that? I can't even do all that in one day, right? And it's because they're just throwing everything on the menu to see what sticks. You want to find somebody that's a specialist at what they do and find out what kind of volume are they taking on. You know, Brandon asked me like what percentage of probate is my practice. It's got to be 95% to 100 basically. I mean, with the files that we have rotating all the time, and we're always in real estate deals, right? There's always real estate, churning. That's what you want to look for. Another one is just making sure that they get on the creative side. Another thing with probate lawyers, and now that we're on the topic of like, basically, what do you want to look for in a probate lawyer?
Yeah.
What you want to look for too is that they're not just thinking about probate, but also how does the deal get closed. So, I've seen a number of deals, Brandon, where it's a complicated one where they think that they can just get one person to sign on behalf of others, and not every state's the same. Not every rule's the same. And so, you hear it from one person, you hear, yeah, you can do it, you can't do it. You got to really make sure you're with somebody that sees the end. How do you close the deal? So the lawyer that can see the probate, get the probate done, but how do you close the transaction? That's the key. That's what I look at. Every time I look at a file, if you call me and you said, Al, I got this wild deal, what do you think? I'm not looking at it just probate. I'm like, how does Brandon actually get this closed?
Yeah. Okay. That's super fascinating. Thank you for sharing some of that. I mean, honestly, I've heard from a few people that they're a little bit like scared of probate. Like there's just a lot there. And I have every end of the spectrum. I got a friend of mine that is proud of closing his probate deal where there were like 39 heirs or something, and he somehow got it done. I'm like that, and he said it was absolutely not worth it, but it's a cool trophy deal, or whatever you want to call it, right? So I mean, there's that, and there's people that like will actually pass these kinds of leads and these kinds of deals up, or maybe they just don't see something, they don't see the opportunity because they don't understand the process. Like, help me understand. Let's just say, you're talking to an investor and they've got hundreds or thousands of leads in their system, and some of those could be probate. Like, what are the common reasons that they might just be passing them up, where maybe they shouldn't be?
So maybe there's not enough money in the deal. Maybe there's a lot of other issues with the property. Maybe, I'm thinking land, right? So what could be the problems? It's landlocked. There's no rights of access. There's environmental issues. Forget the probate aside. There's all these other problems that they hear about. So they could be passing it off just because of that. Sometimes the money's just not in the deal. They may be able to lock it up for 5 and they're going to sign it out for 20, but then we do the probate analysis and there's going to be 4 probates. Well, the 4 probates are going to each straight into the assignment fee, and then the deal doesn't make sense, right? So sometimes it's not about the probate, but it's the margins, the money, and all these other auxiliary things going on. Another reason some people kind of get a little turned off by it is we find out you think that there's 3 heirs, and then we have the consult, and then we find out, there was a 4th one that died before, and they have 7 kids. And it's like, wait a second, like, so do we have to track down the 7 kids? And it's like, yeah, you got to go find them. And some people don't want to get into it, right? Like, this is the messy stuff. And there's a lot of investors that like get excited. They get energy from like, wait, we got to go find people. I do this for a living. Like I work with those kind of people, right? Like they find people for a living. So, there's a lot of these little things. I always think it comes down to money. I think it comes down to the, getting around it. Sometimes the title companies have weird requirements, right? Or maybe the people are just crazy. Sometimes there's like, crazy sellers, and so they don't want to deal with them. Like, I don't mind crazy deals. I don't want crazy sellers, right? So that's something that a lot of people want to avoid. But going to your point, Brandon, this niche can be one of the most profitable in real estate, I think, because I've just seen so many investors recently where it's not 64 heirs, it's not 32 heirs, it's one heir, it's four heirs, and their assignment fees are like 80, $100,000. Like there's a big range of like spread, and so finding two people or three people is like, it makes a lot of sense because it's going to be their biggest deal, and it changes their entire platform. It changes, who they hire, who they get for acquisitions. Can they get another TC? Can they take on more? So it's a game changer.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. So you would say, like in a typical like situation, basically they'd be responsible for tracking people down, and then the attorney they're working with is just doing all the paperwork and all that kind of stuff to get it done, right? So that's kind of like part of like who usually does that in a company? Is that like acquisitions is responsible for tracking people down, or like just help me understand like when someone's thinking like how do I do more probates, and they're thinking like how does this fit into the org chart and who does what? What's normal?
From what my understanding, it's usually acquisitions, right? Or they'll have somebody underneath them, or maybe go look for them, or they'll hire someone. TCs are not usually doing that. They're just trying to herd everybody together to sign things and do things. But acquisitions is just trying to find and locate people, or maybe try to get more information from the seller. So
Yeah.
that's the one thing I've learned too, that I think a lot of people can get valuable information is the acquisitions. If they can ask the right questions to that seller, that you find out, wait, there's more people. They know the family. They know where people are. I would say most of the time they know. And sometimes you have to ask like three times for them to be like, oh yeah, there's a kid in New York. It's like, well, where was that? Like 6 months ago. Like
Hmm.
we just had a case where at first it was one guy, and then the story kind of changed, and all of a sudden like there's more people, and then all of a sudden there's more. So they all know. And sometimes another golden nugget for people is death certificates. If they're able to get this to help like find more people, or find the next lead. Sometimes death certificates, if you're able to acquire them, will list an informant on it, and the informant, it usually has an address, a name, which is basically like it's a lead to a lead, right? It's another little
Yeah.
clue, so you can find out what's going on.
Yep. Totally makes sense. Um, so let's just say the financials of a deal are sound, right? Beyond that, if we know it's a probate situation, like for people a little bit newer to probate, like what are the key questions they should be asking the seller to better understand, is this an opportunity or is it not? Or maybe like along those lines, like red flags where you're like, you hear this, like just give up now. Like it's not going to work.
Well, definitely the crazy factor, right? Like that's gotta. I mean, I didn't even used to say that before. Now for me, it's like it's definitely the crazy factor. They're out, right? So that's one. Two is who is that person that acquisitions is talking to in relation to maybe the title owner, right? So you want to find out like who is this person in relation to them? Like, are they the cousin, or are they like the child, right? And you have to know that, because that person, very different people are going to have an authority to sign documents, move forward with a probate. And so you first have to ask it. If you're really talking to somebody far down the line, like nephew and cousin or uncle, that's where you kind of have to put your red flag up about, wait, there's got to be a little bit more to the story. It sounds too good to be true. Um, I'd say that's a big one. Of course, just listening out for what they're saying. One thing I've learned is they'll tell you guys they're the only one, and then I find out that there's seven, right? So it's being able to ask the questions in a way that's going to pull out as much as you can, right? You're only going to get so much. So finding out how many children ever, right? It's crazy that we have to say it like that, but for some reason, like when you say it the second time, it like registers, and they're like, "Oh, ever," and it's like, "Yeah, like how many kids ever?" And then they tell you, right? So being able to ask these right questions. I have a checklist too, which could be a freebie for everybody out there, Brandon. Which is, some of the right questions to ask is, where's the death certificate? Do you have the documentation that if we were able to move forward, and you can put somebody in touch with an attorney, that we can do this, right? Do you have the death certificate? Do you have the will? Do you have the important heir info? That's really key as well. A lot of people don't realize, like, those are vital documents to being able to do a probate. That lays the record for being able to say, hey, somebody owned that property, they died, now we have to do this estate administration. And I mean, there's so much to this, like I see every day. A lot of times the sellers will also be really pushy to get the transaction going, and it's like, well, why? Like, what's is there something else going on that we don't know? And I hear about this once in a while, and of course then we find out there's more kids, which is why they wanted to push it to the closing line, because there's more people. So just being able to ask these right questions up front, and at least having a little guide for yourself that can help prepare you when you go to an appointment, so you can find out what's happening.
Yeah, no, that's super good advice. In kind of along those lines, I mean, you sort of touched on this a little bit, but I just want to make sure I'm sucking everything out of your brain that can be found. Is there like, are there any other things you're noticing that are like reasons that deals are blowing up, just never actually getting closed, but are, in your opinion, avoidable if you did things the right way?
Man, that's a really good question, because so I can think in my mind right now of a few deals that we've been scrambling on lately that have blown up, not because of the probate, but one, what happens with foreclosures? There's a payoff, right? And then you think that the payoff is 220, and so your contract price is 260, right? And then all of a sudden you're ready to close, and then the bank shows the payoff, and the payoff is 320. And it's like, well, now what? Even if we increase the purchase price, dead deal. Like, doesn't matter. Like, that's it, right? So we've seen some actually get messed up because the bank just refused and didn't provide the payoff, and now everybody's in a scramble. We've seen some that when you get probates, sometimes these properties are heading for a foreclosure auction. And that's like another niche I kind of get into, as well as like, if they're heading to an auction in 2 weeks or 1 week, can we try to cancel and reschedule the sale? And I'd say about 85% of those have been successful. Sometimes the judge just says no. And we had one recently where the judge was like, nope, we're not doing it. Like, and it's going to go to sale. And there's only so much you can do, right? You only have so much control, and you just do the best you can. So we've seen some deals like that go crazy. Sellers, sometimes everybody's under contract and they're just getting mailed, and somebody's just saying, hey, I'm going to offer you $1 million for your property, and it's like, then they ghost everybody, So we've seen, I say more recently, I've seen some of the probates go crazy, not on the probate side, but like the after part, like when they're about to go to the closing table, when everybody's getting all their numbers crunched, that's when there's something happening. And we saw one recently too, where the acquisitions was on great rapport with the seller. And there's multiple sellers. I mean, they took hours, Brandon, hours, just building the trust, building the relationship. Probate done, out. Just ghost. And we never know. We never know why sometimes.
Yeah, fair point. And there's no like, well, help me understand, like, because again, probate's just not something I know a ton about, but like, let's just say you're under contract with the seller and just normal wholesale deal. And the seller goes to you, like, I know there's ways to deal with that. Like you file a memorandum or whatever the case is. So you can, eventually get paid or, prevent them from selling to another investor, whatever the case is. Can you do that with probate still? Like in this circumstance where like the seller just ghosts you, or can you not do that in a probate situation?
I was just having this talk with my assistant today. It's a tough spot to be in, right? It's kind of the risk that you get into when you play the game. Um, the hope is that everybody's gonna close, right? But then sometimes you get into ones where they do that. Um, Sometimes there's a way. There really is a way. There's probably a lot more work on my end that I have to get into to kind of enforce that. Go through maybe some kind of lawsuit or something like that to get a judgment. But it's really part of the risk, and the hope is that everybody, will get to the closing table at some point. There's an invoice, and the title companies will add your invoice to the line item on the HUD, right? So it's definitely it's a lot harder than people realize. And yeah, I mean, of course, we hear all the investors have the different strategies to making sure they're in place in case that does happen. It's just in our world, it's a little different.
Okay. Yeah, it's good to know that it is a little different. So I'm assuming then that your clients really appreciate that you just get paid at closing,
Oh
basically on these
yeah.
probate. Because
Oh yeah.
I imagine that takes from their plate, that takes a lot of the risk off. Because then they're not thinking I'm getting deep in debt here with Al just to get this deal closed, and then the seller goes to me, and then now I've got all these legal fees, and I don't even have a deal.
Oh, that's one of the biggest selling points. It's probably the biggest selling point for my services, right? Because if investors know that, wait a second, if I get a Florida probate and the title company says, hey, we got to do probate, or there's some kind of probate word that they hear, they're knowing, wait a second, I can get with Al. He'll wait until closing to get paid. Nobody's having to pay anything up front. And by the way, the seller is going to be all in because they don't want to come out of pocket. Because how many attorneys have they been to where they're being told, hey, you need to pay us up, 5 grand up front. And so they don't want to do that, right? But they're like, hey, we'll wait until closing, no problem. I can name so many people that are like loving that strategy because it helps them do deals. I mean, some of the highest volume investors that Brandon, love the strategy because they can just go deal after deal after deal and close and just get it done.
Yeah, no, totally understood. Well, thank you for all the wisdom that you shared today, Al. It's super interesting. For people that want to get a hold of you for whatever reason, I mean, I imagine if you're in Florida, definitely hit up Al for any probate deals you might have. If they're in other states, I don't know if you want me to just tell them not to ever talk to you, Al, or if you still welcome you welcome the reach out. But yeah, if they got to get a hold of you, how do they do that?
Yeah, I'll say this, Brandon. If anybody is looking for somebody in Georgia, I know Georgia. There's a couple states I know of. Illinois, I knew somebody there. California, I think there's someone over there. There's a few states I know. So if somebody needs something like in a certain state, I don't mind at all. I'd say this: the best way to get a hold of me if you're finding deals, because by the way, a lot of people are doing probates now in Florida. So a lot of people are coming into the Florida market just because it's been so hot. Find me on all the social platforms: Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, under Al Nicoletti. My website, www.alnicoletti.com. And if you need to call, 904-999-0053. And of course, I have my own podcast, The Al Nicoletti Show, which we had Brandon on. If you missed that episode, going all into inbound marketing, you got to watch that episode. And we go live on the show 9 o'clock Eastern on Wednesdays. And a lot of people love watching that just because of the value on that too. Just getting more info, and they see me and they see you, and it's just great. So that's where you can find me. I'm all over.
Okay, very cool. Thank you, Al. Appreciate it. And to everybody else listening, I'll see you next week.